Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 14th episode or edition of the Sporting Limerick Soccer Podcast, joined by our analysts Noel and Jason O'Connor this evening to digest last week's game and obviously look forward to Treaty United's next week's game against Galway this Friday evening. Noel, start with the game against Cove last Saturday night. It was a big victory for Treaty United. It certainly wasn't a vintage performance by any stretch of imagination, in an attacking sense at least. But it's now back-to-back away victories, second in the table. And they always say that, the sign of a decent team is when you're not playing well, you can still grind out a result.
Yeah, I suppose in two facets to the game, defence and attack. It's hard to disagree that they didn't create a whole lot in the game. Cove played all the football up to the Treaty's final third. Just were devoid of ideas, any kind of pattern or certainly an individual who could unlock the Treaty defence. Coming down the middle is kind of futile. It's an hour enough pitch down in St. Coleman's, and knocking high balls into the box is certainly futile exercise against Treaty as well. They didn't really create a whole lot themselves, but it was 2 goals from 2 set plays again. Just recover from the disappointment too of a missed penalty, which can often be a kind of a negative in a team, kind of preys on their mind. They got an early goal in the second half and wrapped up the points with a couple of minutes to go, which was a kind of a typical Treaty performance of late, of the last couple of wins. They have been really similar, and it just confirmed what I thought, about Cove. Whatever about being inconsistent, they certainly are quite a limited side, and Treaty were full value for the 3 points, particularly with their defensive show.
Yeah, certainly the case. Back-to-back away victories, Jason, like I said to Noel, they did restrict, as Noel said, Cove to very little clear-cut chances in the game. Shots from distance, couple of headers, all right. Darrell Walsh had a decent chance from a header. But I suppose it was a massive victory considering, the players that were missing. You had the missing likes of Jack Lynch and Sean McSweeney in the side as well, who are vital players. And one of the highlights as well, Jason, was Matt McKevitt grabbing his first goal for Treaty too.
Oh, it was, Adrian. I was delighted for him. It was a long ball. It was a clearance out of the defence. It looked like it was a knocking ball. It was a lost cause. And we've seen from Matt McKevitt over the last month, I suppose, or since he's come into the side in and out, obviously off the bench. But he chases lost causes. And again, this was another case of it. It was 88 minutes. Ball was probably running out of play. He chased it down, kept it alive, actually won a throw for Treaty from the throw-in, obviously, to Willie Armstrong. Lovely little dribble from him, and McKevitt finished it off. So just deserves for him on his work rate, I suppose, Adrian, and probably edges him a little bit closer to a start, I suppose, in the coming weeks as well. He's really giving Tommy something to think about. But look, myself and Noel called it together for once. We expected them to win. They went and won. You rightly said it wasn't a vintage attacking performance, but look, we've been saying it for a while now. The kind of rock this team is built on is its defence and its defensive shape and play. So that's what's getting them the results, Adrian. It's no secret really for us.
Yeah, I was worried about the amount of optimism in the camp last week. I didn't have to worry too much in the end. They did get the victory for the game. Noel, I was going to leave it maybe till further down the line, maybe to talk about it, but because Jason had that in one of his finishing points about Matt McKevitt, he was probably disappointed that he was kept until the 85th minute, until he was introduced on Saturday evening. I know Kieran Hanlon obviously missed the penalty, but I did feel that they needed maybe a fresher approach at that stage in the second half. The only thing is, for coming into Friday night particularly, do you think that Matt McKevitt will start? Because I do know Kieran Hanlon did play well in DC Park for the majority and did give Killian Bruder, a tough evening, and Maurice Nugent. So it'll be hard to know whether Tommy will finally give McKevitt a start, I suppose.
Yeah, and I suppose he look at the result and say, look, we won the game. He's made an impact coming off the bench. I do think, and I've thought it for a couple of weeks, I think he deserves a start. And it was just the way that Jason described the goal there. So you're looking at the alternative there. Nobody chases the ball down. Cove collected, and straight away they're back attacking Treaty. And from that attack, they may well have got an equaliser. And you're coming out with a draw. And it's those small things that are really important. But I've said it for a few weeks. I'm surprised that. I'm not saying he should start every game. I'm surprised that he hasn't started the game yet. I'd like to see him play in a full match. I think they will be up against it on Friday night. I think Galway have improved a lot, because we weren't in action, if you like, on Friday night. We got a chance maybe to look at more of the other matches. I watched a good bit of the Galway game, and I thought that even the pace of it, I thought they were very impressive. Okay, it was a 1-0 victory, but I thought they murdered Cabinteely on the night. It could have been a hell of a lot more. It was a real dominant performance. I thought they were very quick and slick and fast, and they monopolised the ball, and they kept going. So I think it'll be a tough night on Friday night. I think the pitch will suit Galway. They have a couple of wins now, and maybe they're starting to accelerate out of the blocks, which we've kind of touched on in the last few weeks. We've been kind of wondering when it was going to happen. It was a bit stop-start, but look, it's a very big game, for both teams again on Friday. I think we say that every week as well. But certainly a very resurgent Galway coming to the Marcus Field, and I think it's going to be a great night.
Yeah, just a fortnight ago, Jason, we were talking about, the struggles that John Caulfield was having maybe 3 weeks ago, because Galway were hammered by Shelbourne 4-0. I know that's easy done in this division, considering the form Shelbourne are in, but they have reacted really well with 2 victories. Particularly, as Noel said, they were in total control against Cabinteely last Friday. We knew that there was always a chance that they would come good. They're now in like Treaty in very good winning form coming into the game. Would you say, judging on the fact that Galway are in a resurgent form, that you'd certainly nearly take a draw at home to keep Galway at arm's length on Friday evening?
Yeah, I think that should be the goal for Treaty, Adrian. I think Galway, I suppose, their problems are, we highlighted them even before the ball was picked this season, was going to be scoring goals. And even though they're on the back of a couple of wins, they're not really hammering teams. They might be with the ball, but they're not putting lots of goals past teams. And when you look at Treaty's defensive record and you look at the back five, I suppose, is cemented in place now. That's not going to change, I suppose, unless someone gets suspended again. So it's going to be a little bit cat and mouse in that sense. I think Treaty will do the usual. They won't change anything. Nothing has changed from the start of the season. Last weekend, they were probably a little bit more defensive even than normally. You look at the 3 midfield players, there was none of them in the number 10 position for me, Adrian. The 3 of them were sitting deep, and that showed with Darren Murphy getting on the ball regular in the first half for Cove. Noel quite rightly said they didn't do a whole pile with it from there. They didn't create anything clear cut, and that's because the back five, I suppose, including Tig in that, and you put your defensive midfielders in front of that, they're very, very hard to break down centrally. We can see that. Pitch will be a lot bigger on Friday. We know that in the Markets Field, and Noel is quite right when he says that'll suit Galway, but they don't really have the punching power up front, I don't think, to put 2 or 3 past Treaty. So once that steadiness stays at the back, I think Tommy'd be happy with a draw. That would keep him, I think, in second position. And it's, without using his own phrase, but it's just taking another game off, Adrian, without a defeat. That's really it, I suppose. They looked to me like last week, they were set up for a draw against Cove, the way the team was set up. And that's kind of the way they're playing. They're set up that way, and then they wait for a mistake or they wait for a set piece and they capitalise, and they're very, very well organised, and I don't think Tommy can dispute at this point that they've become defensive. It's blatantly obvious now, for everyone to see. So I'd agree with Noel in the sense Treaty would take a draw. I think they'll go for that. That'll be my prediction as well.
Yeah, definitely. Noel, Jason mentioned the midfield. It was a concern, particularly in the first 30 minutes. I did notice that the defensive Treaty, the back 4, were kind of urging their midfielders to close down the opposition earlier and maybe push up a bit higher on them. It didn't happen really. I know that Mark Ludden was very complimentary of Joe Collins' performance after the game. Personally, I thought maybe his lack of game time showed in that game, and I think it was a bit off the pace. Ed McCarthy, as Tommy mentioned and alluded to after the game, was tired. He even mentioned that they gave him a night off during the week because he was showing signs of fatigue recently due to the job as well as hard training. He's played a lot of games for a 20-year-old. Then obviously you've Jack Lynch that, is touch and go probably for Friday, considering he was pulled out so late of the game Saturday, and Sean McSweeney. The midfield is probably an area of concern for Tommy going into this game, Noel, particularly if Jack is going to be out. Clyde obviously came in at half time the other night. Do you think that he will probably come into the game straight away on Friday?
I think he will, yeah. I'd say so. And look, in fairness to Joe Collins, and you said it, it's first of all finding out maybe 20 or 25 minutes before the game you were starting. I know we say that guys should be ready and all that, but if most guys know the night before that they're starting a game, you hadn't even had much of an appearance as a sub in the last few weeks, so it was probably a bit out of the blue. It may well have suited him, but it's understandable that he would be off the pace. I think it must be a concern. Again, we go back to the bigger pitch, and while Galway struggles, say, to finish chances, you certainly think they're very strong in midfield, and I think Clyde will definitely start. He'll be hoping that Jack Lynch will start as well. They'll need their kind of big guns in there if they are to contain that Galway midfield, and hopefully that Jack and Clyde are fit to start, because I think they will be very, very important if Treaty are going to get that draw or a victory.
Yeah, and I know, Jason, you've had your own reservations about maybe where Clyde O'Connell would fit into the side. In fairness, Callum McNamara is someone I want to mention, because I still thought he played pretty well Saturday evening, stepped up to the plate probably when the chips were down. Clyde came on at half time, Jason. Would you agree with the fact that you need maybe him in a more experienced fashion to come into the game? Because I know you were he came on, he got a yellow card, and that's the discipline has probably been one thing that you were worried about. The chances are, though, he will be in the starting lineup on Friday night. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't be so sure, Adrian. He's on 5 bookings now, 9 appearances, 5 yellow cards, 1 red card, and there's only 1 assist and 1 goal thrown into that mix as well. So you've got to bear these things in mind, because you can't afford to get out to 10 men against a team like Galway, because then they could have a chance of putting 2 and 3 past you. Callum McNamara, for me, has been excellent in that sitting role in the middle of the field. Doesn't do anything ridiculous. Gets on the ball, wins the ball. And if you look back at the Wexford game, it was him and Jack Lynch that turned the game in Treaty's favour. So, you're wondering about Clyde O'Connell. We spoke there about the back 5. That's set in stone. He's not going to get into the back 5 if everybody is fit. And you've got to bear in mind then that Mark Walsh is out injured as well at the moment. So if you had Mark Walsh fit in the middle of the field, I'd be inclined to play Jack Lynch next to him and Sean McSweeney in the 10. And even this weekend, I'd be picking, if it was me, I'd have Callum McNamara. If Jack is fit, he'll be playing. And obviously then you have different options for the number 10. So I think the only way Clyde will start this weekend is if Jack is out. Because again, if that number 10 role, I suppose, they can't afford to sit back like they did in the first half against Cove at home against Galway. You've got to be pushed up slightly. You can't be completely dropped off because the pitch is too wide and too big, and they'll exploit the spaces. So, plus you'll need something on the transition to attack. There was absolutely no transition in the first half whatsoever to attack. I think the first shot on target, correct me if I'm wrong, Adrian, was the penalty. So again, you're up against better players and you play Galway. You keep giving them the ball back, and they'll hurt you. So back to your original question, I suppose for me, it would be Callum McNamara and Jack. If Jack is fit, you're looking into the 10 position then, whether Ed is fit or whether you're willing to bring in Joel Costrain into that position. I know Tommy has done that a couple of times as well. But look, Clyde is a good option. He can play in midfield, he can play centre-back, and he can play left-back as well. So he's a versatile lad, but he has a lot to learn at this level.
Yeah, I suppose it'll be interesting to see whether Ed McCarthy does make it in, because that might be the ticking whether he starts or not in the game, Noel. There's been contrasting form for 2 players for Galway, two Limerick natives. You've Killian Brewder, who's been very solid in recent weeks. If you were to talk to the Galway natives, his form is taken by storm recently. You've got Shane Duggan then, who's at the other end of it. I know that from speaking to Cian O'Connell and Vinnie Farty, that Shane Duggan was actually carrying a knock, which is the biggest reason as to why he was dropped to the substitutes bench for the game. Noel, do you expect Shane Duggan to start against Treaty on Friday?
I'm not sure. I know, say, from what I do know about John Caulfield is I could see him, they won last week. He was happy with the performance. I wouldn't see him making too many changes. There wouldn't be any sentiment in it. When I saw Conor McCormack going there, I just, a bit like England, if you like, with their two kind of sitting midfielders. Shane Duggan has changed a lot from the time I saw him playing for Cork in the early or mid 2000s, like when, his ability to run, his box to box, was quite phenomenal. Like, and that isn't the same anymore. I think himself and Conor McCormack are quite similar now in that kind of sitting, holding position. But I think, in fairness, at the moment, Conor McCormack is in way better form, and it might be just that John Caulfield, he's kind of tweaking the team a little bit. He probably felt maybe that they were a bit too defensive, not creating enough. So he might have thought that he might just go for one, if you like, defensive midfielder and bring in someone else to try and create a bit more. And look, they have a couple of wins under their belt now, so they'll probably be vindicated in the way they were thinking. And it's unlikely that he'll start this week, whether he's fit or not, I would think. But obviously, he's a great option to come off the bench.
Yeah, certainly. And Jason, I was actually speaking to Sean McSweeney personally at the training session last week when I went to interview Tommy Barrett last, and he, worryingly enough, he said that if he was back in 4 weeks' time, he feels he'd be doing well, which is obviously a big disappointment, because I think people were under the impression that Sean was only going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks when it originally happened. Obviously a big loss. He was the joint top goal scorer with Anthony O'Donnell, obviously one of the more creative players. But it just brings me to the point of, we have a July transfer window, Jason, which will be opening up very soon. And when I put the question to Tommy on Saturday night about whether he would, add to the squad, he did say that he may look at 1 or 2 players, but his overriding motion was that he was happy that the under-19s setup was coming in, and he'd be looking to maybe blood a few under-19s. Do you think that both the transfer window and the arrival of the under-19s has come at a good time for Treaty United?
Yeah, I suppose it has, Adrian. Look, Tommy isn't going to have a big budget to go out and spend big on marquee names, and nor should he. The chemistry in the group looks really, really good. You have to be careful what personalities you bring into a group, Adrian, because it can disrupt things. At the moment, it looks on the outside and knowing the players, there's no real egos in the group. They're all working hard for each other. They're not looking at each other going, oh, he's on twice as much as me, or there's none of that stuff going on. So you want to be very, very careful to protect that. I'd be very slow to be bringing in these marquee names, because as we preview games week by week here, we look at players with reputations that don't deliver week in and week out. And we look at the treaty players who probably anyone outside of the region wouldn't be familiar with, and they are delivering week in and week out. So, look, he's obviously short in the final third. For me, add an attacker if you could, but it would have to be, as I said, the right player. And someone like, obviously, Sean McSweeney is very, very hard to replace. But look, it's not vital that they bring in players and they have 19s coming in. Obviously, if that scouting side of things is correct, then they could possibly blood or find another gem there to bring into the squad. They have numbers, Adrian. We can see that, and they are getting results. So it's not a massive thing for me to be adding to the squad.
Yeah, no, that was actually something I was going to say, because on the flip side, obviously, they do seem like a tight group, the Treaty United players. Everyone works very hard because there is no reputations, particularly in the squad. There is some experienced players, but there's no real egos, it seems. Because on the flip side, as I said, to bringing in new players, you do disrupt that. And then also, you've got players there who, like, for instance, to bring in new players, you probably have to get new players out, or get players out of the squad to, that can disrupt things. Would you agree that maybe the July transfer window is probably too early to bring in maybe a couple of players, and that maybe the 19 should be the angle that Tommy concentrates on?
Yeah, I think it's part of the ethos at the club as well. I'm not so sure where they would get players. I suppose the best that you could hope for is, if you had contacts maybe in Dublin and you got a good player out of Shamrock Rovers or Bows, or someone that, that they wanted to give a bit of experience to, if he was the right guy. But again, you would certainly have to be very choosy. But look, the 19s are going to be important, and there's not a lot of money to spend. I think the likes of Cork and Galway, I'd see them going out and getting a few players in. Maybe players with Premier experience, which could help them climb the table a little bit. But other than that, I couldn't see a whole lot going on. And it'll certainly be good to see, if the 19s do get up and running and we get a chance to see some of these lads come on, because everyone really in that group who have come on have made a real impact in the team. And if we could get a few more guys blooded before the end of the season, just to beef up the squad, if you like, for next season, and because very soon they'll have to think about that and just have a bigger group and a more experienced group, just to try and to push on from what's been done this season. It would be great.
Yeah, and Jason, when I was speaking to Mark Ludden after the game, I put it to him that obviously this week will probably represent you're going to the halfway point of the league season. You'll have 13 games played. They're sitting in second place, clear out right now, ahead of UCD, something we probably couldn't have foreseen, especially after losing to UCD in the Belfield Bowl so quickly. Anyway, wins obviously been important to add to just the draws you'd be getting, like Tommy said. But when I put it to him about the playoffs, he was very not very quick, should I say, to answer the question, and was thinking about it. But obviously that's going to happen in the media, Jason, that the talk is going to be that take it one game at a time. But when in a dressing room, you've both been in dressing rooms where you've been pushing for promotion, and I know, Jason, you were in a dressing room where you actually got to play off with Limerick FC. When does the talk actually start and the belief actually start that yes, we can make the playoffs here?
Yeah, I was in a dressing room that won the first division as well, Adrian. But you'll start looking at it.
My memory didn't serve me well there.
No, you slipped up there though, Adrian. But I suppose, look, another bit, it won't be just yes, but they'll be conscious of the gap, and you have to look at the table. At Lone 16 points in 7th position, just outside that bracket, I suppose. Bray 17 points, Cabinteely 18, Galway 19 and UCD 19, Treaty on 22. It could change in a week, Adrian. It really could, depending on the games and the results. So they'd be foolish to be thinking of playoffs at this stage, and you can be sure Tommy has them well warned, when you're talking to the media, especially Sporting Limerick, because you're probably the only one that asks them the questions. To come out with the mantra that we're taking it a game by game. But to look at it from a player's point of view, look, the goal will be in your head. Every week you're within them playoff spots in the table. You'll be looking forward to it. But as we said, it can change very, very quickly. So they're probably right not to be looking too far ahead. But like I said, every week that they're in them playoff spots, it'll become stronger in their minds.
I know that young Ed McCarthy might have been caught a bit on the hop a couple of weeks ago. The inexperience might have showed when he was asked about the playoffs, and I'd say Tommy might have been quick to root that out in the dressing room again once he was caught about it. But which was quite evident with Mark Ludden, who'd be experienced enough anyway, Noel. But would you agree with Jason there, Noel, that even if there was any murmurs to be coming into the dressing room of we can make the playoffs now, would you have been the same as Tommy and quick to stamp that out?
I would, but look, I'm sure the players are talking about it. Obviously Tommy isn't talking to the media about it, and probably within his own coaching group. You're talking about it being the halfway mark, say tomorrow, or they should be still second tomorrow, with a point or 3, and it's halfway through. And I'm sure both the coaching staff and the players will be desperately disappointed if at halfway they've been second. When they started, so late in terms of their preparation, and how much better they've been, say, in the last 5 or 6 games compared to the first 5 or 6 games in terms of garnering points, that they're going to end up 6th now between now and at the end of the season. I'm sure they will be really disappointed. So that conversation is certainly going on with the players. And I'm sure it's gone on within the coaching group as well. But the only people who aren't privy to it is ourselves. But obviously, we have a bit of experience from being in dressing rooms and we kind of know how they do operate. And Tommy's right that they're not talking about it because, they shouldn't really be. And game by game is always the best way to go. But within the group, they're certainly talking about it. I wouldn't have any doubt about that.
Yeah, and Jason, just to go from Airtricity League First Division to the Premier Division, I know it's been a while now since we talked about the managerial merry-go-round, but there was one surprise last week that emerged in Vinnie Perth returning to Dundalk, an amazing U-turn really. I know there's a few managers, including the inexperienced Dave Rogers, who was linked with the job, and no one seemed to know what was going on at Dundalk. There's a lot of unrest up there. Would it be fair to say you were surprised that the U-turn with Vinnie Perth come back?
I think everyone was, Adrian, and I suppose after that, nothing should surprise us really. When you remember the fashion, I suppose, that it departed in, but things aren't well up there. We can see that from a mile away. We can see that, and something that Noel mentioned probably 2 months ago. Noel flagged it to us. That Chris Shields was on his way out of Dundalk and heading to Linfield. So, things definitely aren't right up there. Is he the right man to go back in and change things around? I'm not so sure. He's a very brave man to take it on, that's for sure, Adrian. But look, things weren't great at Waterford as well, for a while, and they've turned it around with some decent results. So, look, who knows? In League of Ireland football, as I said, nothing should surprise us, but I certainly was surprised with that one.
The cat's out of the bag, Noel. Your source might be unhappy with us revealing that you knew about the Chris Shields move before many knew about it. But yes, Chris Shields obviously moving away is a big blow to Dundalk, considering he has been literally the mainstay from when they were nearly relegated in 2012. 2011, all the way to winning 16 trophies. I believe Chris Shields has won. But just to move on, I suppose, to our prediction side of it, Noel, we'll start off with obviously the treaty game against Galway. What's your score prediction for the game Friday?
Yeah, probably a 1-1 draw. I think Treaty will do well to get a draw, and I'm hoping they will get a draw. But I do feel that a very strong and confident Galway team are coming down, and it'll be a really tough workout. Certainly a lot tougher than last Saturday night. And I think Treaty themselves will probably be happy, and they'll probably take a draw now. They mightn't if they're 1-0 up going into the 93rd or 94th minute. But I feel a draw about Friday night.
Yeah. Jason, I know you mentioned that you don't expect Galway to score a lot of goals. What's your own prediction?
Yeah, I said it a while ago, Adrian, that I felt with Treaty's, I suppose, defensive record and defensive strength and Galway's lack of punch power for me, that it will end in a draw. So I'd agree with Noel again this week. A 1-1 draw is probably the most likely result.
Yeah, we move on now to Athlone versus Bray. We've a gloating O'Connor up in the top corner of the screen because Athlone have went through a very barren period. I believe it's 6 defeats in the last 7 games, which is massive really, and they host Bray, who will be in high spirits, like after beating UCD 4-0 at the Carlisle grounds. What way do you see this one going, Noel?
I can see Bray winning it. To be fair, UCD are Athlone obviously on in a very difficult patch of form. I was a bit surprised at their start, to be honest with you. Like I didn't think that they do quite as well. I was just worried about the makeup of the squad. I'm sure it's a difficult place to be at the moment. I'd say Adrian Carby has his hands full in trying to quell, whatever is going on. But there's obviously something, a team that wins 4 or 5 matches and all of a sudden has 1 win in 6 or 7. There is something wrong. It's probably not the game they need tomorrow night. A very informed Bray team, because we were saying how good Bray were, and their issue was not scoring goals, and then they come up and get 4 against one of the best teams in the league. So it's hard to look past a Bray victory tomorrow night.
Yeah, definitely. Another massive game, Jason, is Cabinteely and UCD. I mean, Cabinteely are like Jekyll and Hyde, really, aren't they? You really don't know what you're going to get from Cabinteely week to week. But, at home, outside the Westford game, I suppose to be quite strong. UCD will be hurting, and there's only 1 point separating these teams as well. What way do you see it going here on Friday?
Yeah, that's the important one, Adrian. There's only a point between them, in favour of UCD, obviously, who are we're on the back of 2 defeats, you know. So, look, what are we going to get from Cabinteely? They're not going to give away a pile of goals, that's for sure. But I think UCD will bounce back at some point, and I think this could be the week to do it. You know, we know about their firepower. We know about Colin Whelan, obviously. And if he's on song and they can cut out the silly stuff at the back, then I think UCD could turn Cabinteely over. So I'll go for a UCD win, Adrian.
Yeah, Noel, Cork City were full value for their victory over at Lone, let it be said, last week. They now face the unenviable task of going to Talca Park and to stop the steamrolling train of Shelbourne, who are pushing all the, in fairness to Wexford, gave them a very good game. It was a penalty separated the sides last week, but they're still winning all the time. Noel, it's hard probably, I suppose, to look past Shelbourne winning this one.
No, you can't really. And look, we keep on predicting Shelbourne to win, and probably some night we're going to be wrong. It may well be this weekend, but it's just hard to see it. There's just too many goals in the team. Look, they must be super confident. They're playing at home. You know, they won't certainly be caught, you know, thinking that they have an easy match, because regardless of Cork City's form, it's Cork City. And in the Shelbourne's heads, they're certainly a big club, and there's a bit of history between them for the last 15 or 20 years anyway. So because of that, I can see a Shelbourne victory. Yeah,
and finally, Jason, obviously we've discussed the fact that this first division is so exciting. The game at St. Coleman's Park Saturday night, Cove and Wexford, is probably as close to a dead rubber game in some respects for the rest of the division as you'll get. You've got teams down bottom. Obviously, Cove now are a bit of a distance away, but not too far away, obviously, if they pick up some form in the table. It's a strange game. It's going to be also very hard to call, but it's important for those two clubs, to be fair.
It is, of course, Adrian. And looking at the table, you're probably cutting off Cork City this week if Shelbourne beat them. You know, they're 10 points behind Treaty. Cove are probably cut off now, and obviously Wexford with only 3 points are cut off. I was a little disappointed in Stuart Ashton's approach against Treaty last weekend, and felt he should have went 4-4-2 and kind of pressed on to Treaty a little bit more, and a stat that might lead me to believe that Wexford can get a result there. You know, I'd like to see him get a result. To be fair, I was disappointed in Cove overplaying, as we always say, in the wrong areas, you know, playing out from the back into the middle and then going nowhere. You know, so if they approach the game the same against Wexford are well capable of getting a result off them.